week's episode of the Mixtape with Scott. I'm the host, Scott Cunningham, a professor of economics at Baylor University in Waco, Texas. I have the honor this week of having on the show Dr. Avinash Dixit, professor emeritus at Princeton University. Dr. Dixit needs no introduction. He is an extraordinarily impactful economist who's made seminal contributions to areas like development, micro theory, game theory, industrial organization, trade, probably some other stuff I'm not even thinking of. I will just say it made me so happy, and I felt so fortunate to have a chance to interview him, as I've been a very long time admirer of him and been astonished by the range of material that he's produced, from very technical theory to very generally accessible popular books about economics. In our conversation, Dr. Dixit shares his journey from growing up in India as the son of a university professor of physics, his own academic trajectory towards becoming a mathematician, and then how that ambition transitioned into becoming an economist. The story of it is a story of randomness and chance, and there were many of those that he ends up telling. As he tells them, I just kept thinking how take one person out of our life or put one person in our life, and who knows where we would be. So he talks a lot about that, talks a lot about his tutelage under the late Bob Solow, his time as a student at MIT, as well as background on the origin of that paper, that 1977 American Economic Review article on monopolistic competition with Joe Stiglitz. So I hope that all of you enjoy this as much as I did. The podcast is devoted to the real stories of living economists, tries to create out of those personal narratives something like an oral history of the profession. And this episode is just a tiny sliver of Dr. Dixit's remarkable story, but I hope that it comes across that he is a very generous man and a very pleasant person to speak with, not even touching upon how brilliant he is. So thank you so much for tuning in, and share the podcast if you like it. All right. Well, it is my pleasure to have with me on the podcast someone who I've been a long time admirer of, but this is my first time to get to ever talk to them. Dr. Avinash Dixit. Dr. Dixit, thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, my pleasure.
For the sake of the listener, if you could just start off, if you could tell us your full name, and I already said it, but if you could just say it again, your name, your job title, and who pays your paycheck.
Um, my first name is Avinash, last name Dixit, and I am an emeritus professor. That's a retired professor at Princeton. Nobody pays me a paycheck. I get money from my pension account, TIAA, and from Social Security, however long that lasts.
I actually didn't realize that. How long have you been emeritus?
Oh, a long time,
Oh, okay.
10, 12 years. And I recommend to everybody, retire as soon as you are financially able to, because then you can do all the things you want to do and
Yeah.
don't have to do any of the things you don't want to do. So specifically committee meetings.
That sounds a wonder. That sounds
Yep,
like the best life.
yep.
Well, let's go ahead and get started with an icebreaker. I like to do these before we get started. Can you tell me about a vacation that you've had in your life that it might not be your favorite vacation? It doesn't have to be your worst vacation either, but it's a vacation that you sort of have noticed that you've thought about it every now and then, the last few years, every now and then it just sort of has popped in your mind.
Oh, hard to choose. Again, since I retired, I've been able to go well, with my partner on a number of cruises.
Wow.
And uh, We've been on ocean cruises, we've been on river cruises.
Oh.
One first we did, which was a Viking cruise up the Rhine and then down the Danube.
Oh.
And uh, that was fantastic. Uh, my partner, especially, she is an artist, kind of painter and various other forms of art, an amateur, but quite skilled. And
Mm.
for her, going to places like Vienna and also she Jewish, so going to Budapest was great for her and therefore great for me also. It started in Amsterdam and went all the way to Budapest. So that probably is one of the more memorable that we still remember and talk about.
Oh, wow. I've never been there. I've never been to Budapest. Was that your first time to go there when you went with your
Oh,
partner?
yes. No, I'd been for a very brief conference many years ago, but that's not the same.
Yeah, that's not the same. I totally get it. I totally get it. Well, that's neat. I've not been on any cruises, but I love the water. Well, let me get started. So, where did going back to your growing up? Where can you remind me again where you grew up?
Okay, I was born in India, in Bombay, which they now call Mumbai, and that's another
Mm.
story I might not be able to get to. Um, and lived there for like the first 19 years of my life.
Oh.
My father was a professor of physics at the University
Oh.
of Bombay, and my mother was basically a homemaker, although a graduate. So I was brought up in quite a sort of intellectual is too much, but anyway, intelligent home, lot of
Oh.
reading, a lot of talking about subjects. Math was my strongest point in those days, and physics was the kind of secondary, a minor subject in my undergraduate work, which I did in Bombay.
Mm.
In those days, they didn't really have honors degrees uh, in India. So it was more or less like the junior college that I got the degree. And in those days, if you were good at math, you went to Cambridge,
Oh.
following in the tracks of Ramanujan, I suppose. So
Mm.
that's what I did.
Hmm.
Bombay, and I've been back for family visits, academic visits, etc., but never lived there since.
Well, so when you were when you were a little kid, what kind of games did you like to play? What kind of kid were you?
I was, I think, a little bit more of a nerd, but the standard things in India for kids in those days were cricket and field
Mm,
hockey, and I played a little bit of both, but
mm,
I wasn't very good at that, actually.
mm. What did you like to do? So if you weren't playing cricket or playing those kinds of games, what kind of stuff did you enjoy doing? Like when you were, if you could have been doing anything.
Oh, reading quite a lot, variety of books, both
Mm,
in Indian languages and English.
mm,
And in those days, my grandparents had a home in Pune, which is
mm,
a smaller town, now really a big town, big city, like 100 miles from Bombay. And we used to go there for summer vacations, and from there one went on hikes, daytime hikes and things like that.
mm. Did you have any siblings?
A sister.
Oh, you had a sister. Were you the oldest or was she the oldest?
No, she was like 4 years younger than me. She passed, unfortunately, a few
Oh,
years
I'm
ago.
sorry. Okay. Okay. And so when you were little, do you remember the first time that you thought to yourself, this is what I want to be when I grow up? What was the first aspiration you had?
Uh, that I have to kind of think back. Uh, um, Being some kind of a scientist was a fairly
Mm.
natural thing to have. My father had friends who were professors of physics and chemistry and whatnot. They used to come to our house and would chat with me, and that seemed a good life.
You enjoyed so in high school, uh, did they have a lot of very strong math and mathematics based classes that you could have take that you took in high school?
No, those teachers were very good. They're not kind of research level math, but
Yeah.
teaching they're very good. And also in the college, I went to there two or three really good math professors.
Hmm. Yeah.
So uh, that kind of reinforced my natural interest.
Well, so you don't go to your dad's college though, right? You go to St. Xavier's College? He was at a different university.
Yeah, he was at the same. I mean, the university had a number of constituent colleges.
Oh,
Where,
I
for
see.
example, Cambridge University will have
Yeah,
Trinity College and King's College and Corpus Christi College and
I
things like
see.
that. And so my father was at the Central University, not so much at a college. Uh,
Mm,
Physics faculty and lab and those things. And
mm.
teaching, undergraduate teaching was done in these constituent colleges, and St. Xavier's was one of the good ones.
Oh, I see. Wait, so is physics in St. Xavier's College? Is that how it's distributed out? It's
Oh,
like
no,
that by
they
subject?
don't teach undergraduate physics in St. Xavier's, yes, but when you went to a research level, graduate level, basically you transferred to the university's central facility. So again, in Cambridge, for example, there are these colleges, and
Yeah.
then there's the Cavendish lab.
Oh, okay. Well,
Well,
so that's what I'm trying to figure out. Is St. Xavier, is the college got economics? Is that, do you end up picking like a college based on you're wanting to major in economics, or what exactly is your is happening?
good, but I mean, these colleges teach all kinds of subjects.
Oh, okay.
And yes, sure, St. Xavier's had its economics faculty. But no, I never did economics till much later.
Oh, what are
That's
you
another
majoring in at
story.
St. Xavier?
Math.
Math. So immediately you're interested in math.
Yeah. And
Oh.
that's how I actually also majored in math at Cambridge.
Mm.
They have these subjects called triposes. So I did
Uh-huh.
the math tripos.
Oh. So your entire time at St. Xavier College in Mumbai, you just are majoring in mathematics. There's no economics that you experienced there?
No economics, except in
Oh,
daily life. Hey, I mean, one lives in
except in daily life.
experiences economics and kind of has casual thoughts, but I'd never kind of thought about it seriously, either taking classes. I was in the science side and one specialized fairly quickly. So in one's first year, one would do like math, physics, chemistry, biology, and then gradually focus into one's major. So that's what I did. No, how I got into economics is another story. We'll, I suppose, get to that when we move to Cambridge.
Yeah, I guess so you leave Xavier and are you thinking to yourself, I want to become a mathematician and so I'm going to go to Cambridge?
Yes.
Oh, oh. So tell me about what was it about Cambridge at the time? Was it well known for something particular in mathematics?
Oh, well, yeah, they've always been one of the top places for mathematics. They had famous people like G.H. Hardy,
Yeah.
the, uh, the famous Indian prodigy Ramanujan was taken by Hardy as his protege, and it's a kind of well-known story. So for Indians to do math,
You go to.
Cambridge is the holy of holies.
You must have been pretty excited then when
Oh
you
yes, sorry.
you must have been really really excited when you got there.
Oh yes, yeah.
Was it so you're accepted into the master's program or is it the PhD program?
Oh no, no. So as I was telling you, the Indian degree is not of the honors standard.
Mm,
Or it wasn't in those days. They have changed it and now it is. So I had to do the Cambridge undergraduate math degree, but I could do it in 2 years. I could start with senior standing.
I see.
That's what I did. So
Okay, okay.
after
Uh,
that,
so you go there and you do your sort of upskilling, you're skilling up on this mathematics training. And is it a master's degree or is it a bachelor's?
it's a bachelor's.
It's a bachelor's.
Yeah.
So you are you still thinking the whole time? Hold on one second, Dr. Dixit. Let me just real quick. I need to pause. Okay, sorry. So you're at Cambridge and you're still thinking to yourself, I want to become a mathematician. Is that continuing to flourish when you're there, or does your mind start changing?
No, no, I was doing well, but there's, of course, as you know, pure math.
Yeah.
Things where you set up axiom systems, prove theorems, etc.
Hmm.
Those are things like algebra, topology, whatnot. And then
Hmm.
there's applied maths, like uh, dynamics, differential equations, optimization, etc., etc. And
Hmm.
gradually, as I sampled both, I realized that my main interests were on the applied side.
Oh, really?
And the main application in those days at Cambridge was physics,
Mm.
including things like cosmology and whatnot. Uh, um, that's where the kind of famous mathematical physicists like Stephen Hawking and whatnot came from.
Oh,
And I said, hey, look, physics has been taken. Let me look for some other field in which applied math can prove useful.
oh,
And I was very lucky. The economics faculty member at my college, Corpus Christi College, was Andrew Bain, who was a monetary and finance economist. Later on, he was involved with the Bank of England and all that. And so I went to him and said, hey, this is what I would like to explore. What should I read?
yeah.
And uh, he, although he was much more on the macro and monetary side, gave me perfect advice. He said, read Debreu's theory of value and
Mm.
Samuelson's Foundations of Economic Analysis. So
How
I
old
read
were you?
both,
How old were
and
you when you said that? What was your age?
oh, I was what, about 20?
Oh,
So I read both, and actually, again, with my interests in applied math, the Samuelson one seemed much the more natural one. The Breu was fascinating, but it was like pure math. It was
yeah,
proving existence of equilibrium, things like that.
yeah.
So I went back to him and said, hey, this Samuelson type economics is what I want to do.
Mm.
He said, oh, okay, there are two places for you to go to grad school, MIT and Princeton. Princeton,
Mm.
where Will Baumol and people like Richard Quant are. MIT, of course, has Samuelson, Solo. And so I applied to both for graduate school, was admitted by both, and for whatever reason, probably because of Samuelson's book, ended up at MIT.
Yeah. What year is that? That's like 1964?
65.
65? Your incoming class
That's
at
when we
65?
started at MIT, yes.
And you hadn't taken any economics. You had just read DeBrue's book and Samuelson's book.
Oh, and then I went back and read Samuelson's textbook
Oh,
to kind of get some basic groundings independently of math. But yeah,
yeah.
it took me a while to get into the natural way economists think.
Yeah.
When I was in grad school, there are brilliant people who would kind of think economics so fluently, and
Yeah.
I had to learn that slowly.
What did you, okay, that's really interesting. So, because you're old enough and you're motivated enough that you can sort of tell economists are thinking differently than you thought. So, what did that mean? What did you notice back then when you were really young at the beginning? What was that way that economists thought? How is it different from the way that you were thinking?
Um, Various things, but I mean, just quickly formulating problems in terms of supply and demand, equilibrium, interaction,
Mm,
choice and decisions that underlie the interaction, all those
mm.
kind of things came much more naturally to them. Whereas
Yeah.
I had to kind of consciously think through.
Oh, oh, that's
Because
interesting.
there wasn't a great deal of game theoretic thinking. That
Yeah,
kind
that's
of
what I was gonna.
great, but
There
uh,
was not a lot of game theory at MIT when you got there?
um, uh, it kind of existed a little bit. People might talk of our linear economic models class would have zero-sum games and the minimax theorem.
Mhm.
And somewhere in imperfect competition, they might just mention Nash equilibrium,
Oh,
but not much. Not much was actually done with that.
is that just now? See, I don't know I don't know exactly how the influence happened and when it became so influential, but was was it just a very early time? Like there was no departments where there would have been that kind of strong game theory? It was just very
Uh,
early or
yeah, probably not. I mean, I don't have a kind of wide enough perspective, but there are kind of isolated people in various places that did
Mm,
that, uh,
yeah,
but not very much. I mean, even in Princeton, game theory was pretty much in the math department.
right,
By
right.
then, all the kind of major figures had left to go elsewhere.
Yeah,
Aumann, Nash himself, um, Morgenstern was kind of just retiring at that point, and he was never a kind of really huge influence on other people in economics, in the economics department.
right, right. Well, so at MIT, so you get there, um, and so what was that first year like? What were who taught your micro and your macro classes?
Oh, there were various people, some of whom you may or may not even remember now. The first semester macro was taught by F.Z. Domar, who was a Soviet specialist.
Oh,
And the first semester micro was taught by Bob Bishop,
oh,
was somewhat older, Marshallian type, but learned a whole lot from him.
mm,
Macro, I was puzzled.
Mm,
because micro had taught us Walras law. The aggregate value of excess demand is zero. And I
mm,
simply could not understand how there was just pure excess supply in the labor market when all
mm,
other markets were clearing.
mm,
What happened to
mm,
Walras law? And
mm.
uh, now you might remember, just around that time, although we were not on to it, Clower was writing, making the distinction between notional demand and effective demand.
Yeah, yeah.
And Walras law applied to notional demand. There's
Mm,
notional excess demand in the goods market corresponding to the notional excess supply in the labor market. People were planning to spend or thinking they would spend the money they were hoping to earn. But that didn't actually do any good because their demand was not effective.
Wait, are these ideas happening when you're a grad student?
Oh, no, we never knew of that. And that's why, more or less, I kind of gave up on macro.
Oh.
I did do the longer run macro. The second semester, Bob Solo taught the
Mm.
growth part of macro. And that was fascinating. That fitted my skills exactly.
Oh yeah.
Dynamic
So
equations.
what was it your skill? You said that, sorry, I interrupted you. You said that that fit your skills. What was it? What do you mean by that?
Oh, the applied math skills that I'd learned at Cambridge were
Okay.
just right for growth dynamics, differential equations, their short-term and long-term solutions, things of that kind. And so
Okay.
that was very much the right place for me to be, with, of course, the micro grounding of optimization decisions, both at an instant and intertemporal.
Oh, do you are you gravitating towards Dr. Solo as like maybe someone that you want to work more closely with? Or is that what was it? What was even the atmosphere like? Is that how it worked?
Yeah, um, matter of luck.
Oh,
So the kind of unit I was attached to when I first came to MIT was the operations research group.
yeah,
That's very much applied math.
right.
And I told them, hey, I also want to get seriously involved in economics. Bob Solo was the economics faculty member who was associated with operations research.
Oh.
And so they sent me to see him and also Frank Fisher. And so I kind of got naturally tied into that side of uh, dynamic micro growth. And of course, coming from India and with two or three fellow students, I was interested in doing kind of specific growth issues that arise in less developed countries.
Oh.
And so when I started to do research, I got into building dynamic models of growth for developing countries.
Oh,
And
that
then
was in grad school? That's happening in graduate school?
and yeah, that's what my PhD thesis was.
Oh, okay. Who's your advisor at MIT?
Oh, well, Bob Solo, obviously.
Oh, Dr. Solo was your advisor.
Yeah, and Carl Schell, who at that time was doing optimal growth models,
Oh.
optimization, and Peter Diamond, who
Oh,
also
wow.
growth and whatnot. Hey, I mean, what a stellar committee.
That's like an
Solo,
all-star. That's
Solo.
it. What did you learn from Dr. Solo that you didn't, what that you didn't wouldn't have learned otherwise, you think?
Oh, actually, the most important thing I learned was not necessarily the kind of techniques of economics, but teaching and research supervision. He
Oh.
had just a kind of brilliant knack of uh, making things interesting.
Mm,
So the way I put it is he could even make the simplex method of linear programming seem interesting.
mm,
And for supervision, I mean, at that time, he supervised like about half of the graduate students.
mm.
And there's a long line of students waiting to see him outside his door.
What made him so good at that? What was his skill?
Oh, I don't know, but really, the whole personality, the whole lot of knowledge that he had, the wide range of knowledge that he had,
Mm,
and he was interested in everything.
mm,
So when your turn came to see him, he was so relaxed. It wasn't as if he was seeing you after 8 others in that last 2 hours. Uh,
right.
he had all the time for your problems, made
Mm,
suggestions, and when you turned in a draft, he would read it very thoroughly in 2 or 3 days and come back with handwritten comments in the margin. His
mm.
handwriting was not of the best, but once you learn to decipher it, his comments were really sharp and
Oh,
to the point
wow.
that helped you.
And so, okay, do you write three essays or is it one of the big
Yes,
books?
yes,
You
it
wrote
was.
the, they were doing the three essays when you were in
It was
grad,
very much
that was
yes.
already been done? Okay. I
And
didn't know
in
when
fact,
that started. Sorry.
oh, it became the MIT tradition
Oh,
probably 5 or 6 years before I started.
oh, I see.
So
Okay. Does it start at MIT, the three essay model?
pretty much, although it was kind of coming in. I mean, the basic philosophy was your career, the way economics is going to be publishing scientific papers.
Yeah.
So your thesis, which is training for that career, should be a set of scientific papers.
Right, right. So you wrote three papers and they were development growth. Is that what, and they were theoretical development growth?
Exactly. Theoretical models of uh, what were then called dual economies, basically
Mm.
to do with various aspects of transfer of labor from agriculture to manufacturing
Oh, oh.
and the interaction between them. So one of the chapters was basically on the labor transfer. The second one was how outputs, food from agriculture and mm, various manufactured goods from the manufacturing sector would interact and how that would affect the labor transfer.
Mm, mm, mm.
And the third one was on how uncertainty of agricultural output would play into this.
Is there any signs of this emerging kind of IO that you end up doing later with Dr. Stiglitz? Can you see signs of that at all in that dissertation?
Not in that dissertation, no. It was um, aggregate growth model with just two sectors, and there wasn't uh, honestly a great deal of micro imperfect competition in it.
Mm,
There's micro, obviously, because the farmers in their migration
yeah.
decisions had to think of micro in the model and so on. But no, there's no IO.
Okay, okay. So, but does MIT, I keep trying to like wrap my head a little bit around all the things that you are. Does MIT leave you with all these theoretical skills where you could then go and make this kind of work on monopolistic competition? Is there something I guess I'm trying to figure out exactly what the world was like at the time and just don't know enough of the context.
Well, basically, one could do anything, but yeah, well, what I got was a mathematical toolkit from Cambridge,
Yeah.
training in kind of the way economists think about economic modeling, etc., and how those tools bore on that modeling process from MIT. And then, of course, one could go and apply them to anything.
Right,
And
right.
a lot of that was kind of completely coincidental, opportunistic. Uh, the paper with Joe Stiglitz, which you mentioned, I at that point had moved on to a faculty position at Oxford.
Mm.
And Joe was visiting, and he was doing a specific example or a specific case of product differentiation. I've now a little bit forgotten exactly what it was, but it was something to do with financial assets.
He was visiting Oxford. He came and presented or something.
Uh, yeah, he was a year visitor, and then he came as a full professor at Oxford a bit later, actually, just as I was about leaving
Oh,
Oxford.
okay.
And but the year that he was there, so I read that paper and said to him, "Hey, there's something much, much more general there. Uh, we can think of product differentiation more generally, not just among financial assets, which might be kind of imperfectly correlated because of, well, imperfect correlation of financial assets, but imperfect competition more generally and imperfect.
He,
Uh,
he wasn't thinking of the imperfect competition in that original paper. He was thinking of something to do with assets.
yeah, but the people who marketed those assets were
Oh,
in imperfect competition with each other.
right.
And we had a kind of a specific model of,
Oh, that's the
and I
he had
said,
the
hey,
special kit. Got it. Okay.
kind of much, much more generally valid.
Yeah.
And how do you do that? How do you have, in general terms,
Huh.
imperfectly correlated assets? The CES function seemed a very natural one to try. So
Huh.
that's how it went. Uh,
How quickly did that paper come together?
the first draft probably uh, a term in Oxford. That's like 8 weeks.
Eight
It's
weeks.
yeah, fairly quick. And then, of course, it got um, revised and extended and all kinds of things. Oh,
What? So
okay.
I'm
You
sorry.
Yeah, yeah, you were asking what kind of influence Bob Solo had on me.
Yeah.
And although I don't know this for sure, from what I hear, he was very instrumental in bringing that paper to wide attention. He was teaching a
Really?
class at MIT. He was teaching a class on uh, general kind of research topics. And
Oh.
he saw that paper and thought, hey, well, we should kind of, in the class, read this paper and study it. And again, I don't know for sure, but my belief is that a number of users of that model, Paul Krugman, Paul Romer, Olivier Blanchard, uh, got the idea of using that CES imperfect competition model from that class, from Solo's class.
Wow. Had you sent it to him? You'd mailed it to him or something, or he saw it in the AER?
So, no, I mean, of course, I mailed everything I did to him. Hey,
Oh,
the way you would send things to your teacher.
right. He continued to be a very important person for you. What, long after you graduated?
Oh, yes.
No. Wow. Well, so I'm curious about how you and Dr. Stiglitz kind of worked, what the jigsaw puzzle piece was. What was the comparative advantage that both of you had on that partnership?
Oh, we had kind of similar math skills. Joe was 2 years ahead of me at MIT and had taken similar classes.
Mm,
So we would just stand at the blackboard, either in my office in Oxford or his office in Oxford, and work things out. Uh, so hard to pin down who contributed what.
yeah,
It back and forth, back and forth.
yeah, yeah. Is there a point where I guess you kind of shared it? It sounds like it might have been coming through Dr. Solo, but in your life, though, looking back, when did you start to get the feeling that it really was becoming a very influential paper? Do you remember things?
Oh, it was published in like 77, and I think by the time 2 or 3 years after that, when one started to see Paul Krugman using it in international trade, Paul Romer using it in growth theory, etc. The citation count started to go up. Yeah, one kind of started to feel that, uh,
Mm.
yeah, this was turning out to be something pretty big.
Were you surprised to see it that because of your background in development and growth, were you sort of impressed or intrigued when it began to be used so much in international trade? Was that something you sort of saw easily that would happen, or were you sort of
Oh,
intrigued?
uh, no, at that time, remember in mid 60s, especially India, for example, there wasn't a huge amount of international trade. They're kind of pretty closed economies. The uh, liberalization of international trade to the extent that we've seen until recently came rather later. But
Mm,
no, another part of the story, how I got into the international trade aspect, was another very opportunistic thing. So in 1974, uh, when I'd been at Oxford for about 4 years as a relatively junior faculty member, I got an offer of a full professorship at the University of Warwick,
mm,
what Americans call Warwick. Okay. Um, it's near Stratford-on-Avon and a very good economics department. And I took that up. And one of the things that happened there was that they had a very good IO group.
mm,
And in that context, they invited a Norwegian by the name of Victor Norman from Bergen to spend a year. And um, he and I got talking about various things. We wrote a paper, etc. But somehow or the other, we got talking about international trade.
mm,
And this was again a totally opportunistic development where there's this trade issue, and here I could say, hey, having heard somebody present something in a seminar or something like that, hey, we can do it much more efficiently, much more economically using this mathematical technique. And so let's look for some other problems.
mm,
And we went and collected together so many of these problems that we said, let's just write a book. And
mm.
he actually developed exactly the Paul Krugman model.
Really?
Yeah, actually, probably even before Paul did. But in Norway, they have much more relaxed attitude. There isn't the same kind of pressure to publish.
Mm.
Or published it.
Oh, wow. Is there a draft of that floating around?
Yes, I think I still have a scan or Xerox of a handwritten draft.
Ah, wow. Wait, was that his or was that co-author?
Oh no, that was his alone.
Oh, that was his.
Yeah,
Oh, so,
and we did put it in the book that
mm,
model, but by that time, Krugman's model was also known, so we gave a kind of overall comprehensive treatment for that time. But
mm.
that book on international trade is another of my kind of well cited, well used books.
It's interesting. Not a lot of economists simultaneously have this very active writing articles and writing books, and you have written textbooks and books that are very general interest. And I'm just curious, you know, I'm right that you're unique for doing that, right? That wasn't common amongst your peers, was it?
Well, when I started out, it certainly wasn't. But since then, people have written books of one form or another, either collection of articles with some supplementary things or just standalone books. So my Princeton colleague Jean Grossman has worked with Elhanan Helpman on uh, research papers published in journals, both on international trade and on political economy, and they've written books on that. Paul
Yeah.
Krugman himself collected his papers into books.
Hmm.
Bob Lucas did.
Hmm.
Yeah, so it's kind of becoming somewhat more common to have both papers and
You
book.
were doing it very early, it seems like. You've always been writing books, or you've written a lot of books and a lot of articles of a variety, textbooks, but even things like games of strategy that's clearly got this huge, much bigger audience than just economists. Was it always something that you envisioned early on that you wanted to write books and articles?
Hey, you know how in life things happen more by accident than by design.
Yeah.
Okay, so after Warwick, I came to Princeton in 1980, and I had a joint appointment between the economics department and the Woodrow Wilson School of Public Affairs.
Mm,
So, what was I going to teach in public affairs? By the way, going back a little bit, when I was at Warwick, uh, in connection with my modeling in industrial organization, one of the things I got into thinking about was strategic entry deterrence.
mm,
Pence was working on that at the time, and he had a paper which I thought wasn't really quite satisfactory. Can I do this better? And the way, again, things happen by accident. Somebody, now I forget who, said, you should read Tom Schelling's book on game theory. And that was a revelation.
really?
Yeah, just amazing. I mean, that's where, I mean, you can do math. You can do Nash equilibrium. You can do minimax.
Mm,
But each Schelling and game theory comes to life.
mm.
So, okay, so I had that uh, revelation. And when I got to Princeton, what would be a nice thing to teach to people in the Woodrow Wilson School? I
Mhm,
said, well, I can develop a class on Schelling type game theory,
mm,
which basically conveys strategic ideas with a tiny bit of math, but it's basically about ideas.
Yeah.
And that class was quite successful. Oh, by the way, so one of the things that gets done in those classes, I taught that for a number of years, was completely screening in class the movie Dr. Strangelove,
Oh,
which is
really?
full of strategic issues that are going on about credibility, threats, etc., and then discussing it from a game theoretic point of view.
Oh.
So that was a real fun class. And again, success of a class depends to a very significant extent on students.
Mm,
Again, I got lucky. The very
mm.
first class had Danny Roderick and Ann Case.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And their inputs, the whole discussions. So I kept on teaching that class for a number of years, both to Woodrow Wilson School master's students and then to Princeton undergraduates.
Mm,
One year I was going to be on leave, and Barry Nailbaugh was at that time a junior faculty member who also had these kind of very wide interests. So he offered to teach that class when I was on leave. He did that, and then we said, "Hey, maybe we've got a book there."
mhm.
So that's where the thinking strategically, the popular book, came from.
That's where it came from. You had already developed the class and you had been teaching it, and then he
And
comes
then
in and
Barry, of course, I mean, he's as smart as they come. And he changed a lot of things, etc. So it was really a genuine joint authorship. It wasn't as if I had all the material and he was a TA or anything like that, not at all. So
wow.
it was both a pleasure to do with him and then I don't know if in your other interviews people have admitted so how much happens by chance.
Mm,
So we had this book, didn't have a great title for it. Games, Theory and Art of Strategy. We thought of that. Uh, Publisher said, put the word theory in the title of a book and sales go down by 50%. So, somehow or the other, Norton was looking at this, the publishers, W. W. Norton.
Uh-huh.
And Hal Varian was one of their authors, the micro book and all that kind of clued
Yeah.
in. So he saw that and said to Barry and me, we knew him personally, of course, for quite a bit, said, I've just the title for you, Thinking Strategically.
Mm. Oh, that's great. That's
Yeah, so you see how much happens by chance,
yeah,
and
yeah,
you should always be thankful for your luck. Like
yeah.
Napoleon was asked, "What's the quality you value most in your generals?" And he said, "Luck."
But you've taken advantage of all that luck that's come that you know have been able to capitalize on it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you have got to recognize it and seize it.
Yeah, yeah. We're sort of at the getting close. I didn't want to keep you longer, but I was curious, you know, about your collaborations over the years. It seems like one of the things I've heard is that one of the ways to kind of connect your early years to sort of longevity is just find when you find people that you work really well with, just to continue to work with them a little bit. I was curious though, what is your thought when you hear that, and what's kind of been in your mind sort of helped you sort of have this long career?
So hard to say, but it may be exactly the quality that's very often a bad one, which is switching from one field to another.
Oh yeah.
Our kind of ADHD style of research. A
Right.
better way to put that, which I do, is my research is serial monogamy. Uh, I marry a field for a few years, then something else attracts my interest, and I move on to
Oh.
that field. So I've moved what from development and growth to
Mm,
imperfect competition, IO, to international trade, then
mm,
got into some political economy, got into uh, investment under uncertainty and real options,
mm,
and so on and so on. I think that keeps the mind alive.
mm.
And mind alive is an important part of sustaining a career, I think, right?
Right. Right. Did you ever have anybody that made a comment that said you're jumping around too much?
Um, yes.
Yeah.
And sometimes people who are kind of dedicated to one field, uh,
Mm.
well, when I move out of that, say, isn't our field good enough for you? And that's not at all the case. I mean, there are great issues there, but then I saw this other issue and had to chase after it.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So why'd you stay at Princeton this whole time? I bet you had so many opportunities to leave. What's made Princeton just feel like home this whole time?
Oh, excellent colleagues, mm, collaborators,
Yeah.
collaborators like Gene Grossman, of course, and then John Lonergan in the politics department.
Mm,
And then when I was starting to think about real options,
mm,
Sandy Grossman, who was at Princeton at the time, was immensely helpful.
mm,
Richard Quant has been a long-standing friend, supporter, colleague, um, and then a variety of family things also. That my sister and her husband lived in the nearby area. Then my mother, after she was widowed, came to live with us,
mm.
and things like that. So there are high costs of moving, but
Yeah,
no, on the whole, it's worked very well. No, there have been serious differences with colleagues in the Princeton department, but they
yeah.
could be.
But it seems like that you called it that ADHD, but that kind of that curiosity that drives you from field to field, it would probably really be good to be in a great department with so much diversity and so many new faces all the time. I bet that's just really been a source of constant inspiration.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So even when I kind of wanted to do something different, uh, there's somebody interested in discussing it with me and in
Yeah.
some way collaborating with me.
Well, so are you still working on some things these days? I know you've like you said you've retired, but your mind you also said your mind being active, you keep being curious. Do
Uh,
you have things that still excite you now and you're working on?
yes, actually, again, in a very ADHD style. Well, one of the things I was working on for a few years, actually, so that was more a serial monogamy thing, was corruption.
Oh,
And again, kind of going back to my interest in developing countries where that's a serious problem.
yeah.
the idea I had was whether it could be solved by private action. And what that meant was that, say, the group of business people who are competing with each other for contracts and so on, and each of them has the incentive to bribe the official to get the contract. But collectively, they are losing.
Mm,
So it's like a prisoner's dilemma between them. Can they
mm,
solve the prisoner's dilemma the way many other prisoner's dilemmas are solved by private collective action in a repeated
yeah.
game? And the idea was that they would establish an independent rating agency which would rate companies by how clean they were in matters of uh, bribery or other kind of bad forms of behavior. It would be like a Michelin rating for restaurants. So this is a 3-star business, this is only a 2-star business, and this business gets no stars at all. And we floated that idea around a little bit in India. And you know why it fell flat?
Why?
People pointed out that it's such a litigious place that if you give a business no stars, they'll sue you.
You
And
can get sued as a customer if you gave somebody 0 stars?
if you gave a company zero
Company?
stars and said this company is corrupt, basically, that
Oh,
company would sue you for damaging their business and try and get millions and millions of rupees from you and tie you up in courts for years.
there's something different. There's something different there than there is in other countries. Why can they do that there, but that doesn't happen in other, what is there some particular law?
Oh, uh, I don't know, but maybe it's a little bit like America itself is a very litigious society. Um, there are lots of lawyers, lots of courts, and courts move very, very slowly. So
Yeah,
anyway, that corruption thing came to nothing. And
yeah.
I do a number of things. I've done small mathematical models of transmission of COVID, and what are the kinds of measures that would reduce it. Um, and purely fun things like a pure optimization problem. How early should you plan to go to an airport? And the point is that usually you can never hit it exactly. There is uncertainty. And the standard methods of optimization under uncertainty, there are loss functions. You make an error one side, you suffer some loss. You make an error the other side, you suffer some loss. Those loss functions are usually taken to be quadratic. That's easy because then you get linear action rules. But the loss function for getting to an airport is very, very asymmetric and not quadratic. You go there 5 minutes early, you wasted 5 minutes. You go there 5 minutes too late, maybe you wasted a day. So the
Right,
math
right.
optimization is trickier. And so I did that for fun. And it turns out that how early you should plan to go differs greatly depending on whether it's a shuttle flight that goes every hour or a transatlantic flight that goes twice a day or a trans-Pacific flight that goes only once a day. And our formulas for that. A lot of academics would find that useful.
Yeah. Well, it has been so nice talking to you, Dr. Dixit. I really appreciate you giving me your time and sharing about your story. Um,
No, it's been fun. You pointed me to some others that you had done before, and they also look very interesting. And I thought, hey, this is something I should do.
I am so glad you did. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and say goodbye. It's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you likewise. Enjoy your time in Spain. And thank you for having me.